All right, on problem 34, we are given 2 points, 2 ordered pairs, and we need to write the equation in point slope form that passes through those. So the first thing that we need to do is to figure out the slope between those 2 points. So I'm going to use my slope formula. I'm going to look at the difference in the y values. So 3 minus a negative 7 over 0 minus 2. And that is going to give us a slope of negative 5. So that's my first step. My next step is I'm using point slope form, which is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And since I have 2 points, there's 2 possible answers for this problem. And so if I were to use this first point, I would have y minus y1, which is a negative 7, so that would turn into positive 7, equals negative 5 times x minus 2. Okay, that is one possible answer. My other possible answer is that I use that second point here, and I could have y minus 3 equals, my slope's still negative 5, and then x minus 0. So either of those are possible answers. Our next step asks us to do the slope-intercept form. So if you chose the first point, y plus 7 equals negative 5 times the quantity x minus 2, and our 2 steps here are distributive property, so we're just solving for y. And then using inverse, subtract that 7. That you would get negative 5x plus 3. If you decided to use this second point and had this point slope form and decide to move it to slope-intercept form, negative 5x, when we go to do that distributed there, that's a 0. And then if we move that 3 over to the other side, we get y equals negative 5x plus 3. So what we look at here is that whether we use that for our point slope form or this for our point slope form, you can see that when we rearrange them into slope intercept, they're the same answer. Okay. Let's look at our next one. Our next one asks us to write the equation of the line in point slope form that is parallel. So I have to know that when I look what that word parallel means, that they have the same slope. And so the slope that I'm using is negative 3. And so I'm using that slope, and I'm using this point as my x1, y1. And so I'm going to have y minus my y1 equals my slope times x minus my x1. And that is my first answer for point slope form. Now I'm going to take that point slope form and I'm going to solve for y. So 2 steps for that. First step, distributive property. Negative 3x plus 6. Second step, inverse operation. Take that negative 4 over and add it. And you can see that now we have, for this particular information, we have the point slope form. That's our answer for that here. And then we have the slope intercept form. That's our answer there. Okay, so moving along to number 36. We are asked to look at this keyword right here, which is perpendicular. And if we look at this slope right here, we have to start by interpreting that and knowing that if we are looking for perpendicular, then the slope that is perpendicular to 1/2 is actually negative 2. And I'm going to use this as my x1, y1. And so I'm going to have y minus a negative 6 equals, our slope is negative 2 times x minus a negative 2. And so that's my point slope form. And now I'm going to take this and turn that into slope intercept form by doing those two steps again. I'm going to have to take and do the distributive property. And then I'm going to take that 6 over to the other side using inverse operations. And so now the two answers that I have here, this is my point slope form of the line that's perpendicular to the given line through the point G. And this is my slope intercept form of that. All right. If we look at number 37 asks us to, or tells us the measure of an angle is 3 less than 2 times its complement. Find the measure of both angles. So we're looking for a measure of two angles here. So I have two unknowns. So I'm going to say that I have my first angle and my second angle. I don't know anything, I don't know their measures yet, but I do know that this key word here, complementary, means that at some point I'm going to have equal 90. So I know that a measure of an angle is 3 less than 2 times its complement. Well, that tells me I'm adding two angles together and I'm getting 90. I don't know anything about one angle, so I'm going to call it X. But I do know that this next angle is 2 times its complement and 3 less than it. So now I have an algebraic expression for both of the angles. And I could say that, well, if they're complements, if I take the one angle and I add it with the second angle, that should equal 90. And so if I take and solve this equation, that I'm going to have that X is equal to 31. And that is going to tell me that my first angle up here is 31 degrees. And if I take 2 times 31 minus 3, I automatically know that what my angle should be, because I know that it should equal 90. But taking 2 times 31, 62, and then 62 minus 3 is going to give me 59. And so I found the angle, the measures of both of those angles, and they are complements. They equal 90. All right, so let's look at problem 38 now. Ask us to find the midpoint. Oops, excuse me. There we go. And so midpoint tells me that I am going to take and look at my ordered pair. That is the midpoint. So looking at my X values, I'm going to average those. So 0 plus a -3 divided by 2. So that is going to give me a -3/2. And then I'm going to have my Y's, which is -2 plus 6. And divided by 3, divided by 2, and that is going to give me two. Okay, so there is my midpoint. Over here I need to find CB, which is the distance, and so I'm using my distance formula. So square root, I'm going to take the X values, the difference of the X values, so 0 minus a -3 and square it. And then add that to the difference in the y values squared. So 8, negative 8 squared, 64. And that's going to give me the square root of 73. And I would check to see if there are any perfect square factors that I could simplify this. 73 does not have any. And so I have found that this is my midpoint and that is my distance. Okay. And then 39 is the same type of problem. Asked for both of those pieces of information again, for the midpoint and for the distance. Let me try to get that straight there. Here we go, that's a little better. All right, so if we look at finding the midpoint, looking at my x values, I'm going to have negative 5 plus 2 divided by 2, so that's going to give me a negative 3/2. And then for my y values, negative 1 plus negative 7 divided by 2, that's going to give me a negative 4. So that is my midpoint. And now looking at the distance, square root, and then I'm going to take my x values, negative 5 minus 2 squared, and my y values, negative 1 minus a negative 7 squared. I'm going to add those together. And then the last thing I would do is look to see is if there are any perfect square factors that I could simplify. There are not. So I have found this to be my midpoint, and this is my distance.